Jared Polis was officially sworn in as Colorado's 43rd governor on Tuesday. In his first State of the State address, he outlined his policy priorities, including funding full-day kindergarten, closing corporate tax loopholes, and establishing a, quote, office of saving people money on health care. Patty, except for working on how he names offices, what did you take away from Governor Polis's first State of the State?
Well, between the inauguration and the State of the State, what was, I think, most impressive was the feeling of optimism people were feeling just because of inclusivity. Polis never seemed all that warm and fuzzy, and he certainly did more so on his inauguration day and also during State of the State. I think genius for naming names, not just the office, to save people money on health care, but his daughter, who came up with the Happy Birthday Party, the political party, which we all should be charter members of. That was a great moment during his State of the State speech. He went hard on the all-day kindergarten that will be provided for free somehow through districts, short on financing, but definitely long on that will be the goal of the first year. In addition to providing more health care, saving people money on health care, which gets into more of the rural areas, the Western Slope, which has been hit so hard. He talked about that evening taxes a little bit, still a little vague on how to do it, but that was interesting. Climate change, a huge part of it. Environment, we are definitely going to see more oil and gas laws coming down. And then not much on transportation, which is still a huge concern for people in Colorado. But all in all, good speech, a little bit of bad poetry on the inauguration itself, but a good week for Polis.
David, what did you think of the week overall? It's a State of the State address. It's not supposed to be a full-on policy list, but it states some priorities. Some critics mentioned that he didn't mention a lot of funding mechanisms, but the speech is only going to do so much. What did you take away from the first one from Governor Polis?
That it was a good opening week for him in both the inaugural and the State of the State. As critics point out, he's got lots of ideas for how to spend money. And there is a lot of money around this year with the economy up and the effect of the Trump tax cuts actually add revenue to the state of Colorado. But other people point out that may not persist forever. You always have the problem of the legislature raising spending in good times, then they've got new programs like, say, full-day kindergarten that might not be affordable in a recession. I think his best healthcare idea was to improve price transparency. That's something that doesn't inflict costs on the public and does make it easier for people to shop around and save money on different procedures. Obviously, if you've got a rattlesnake bite and you're going to the emergency room, you're not going to shop around. But there's lots of other things for which people can shop around, and price knowledge would hugely help. I worry that the rest of his stuff on health care may be like Obamacare, enacted with great intentions, but very much of a top-down, central planning hubris. And what we saw with his Obamacare thing was it did help millions of people, and it also harmed millions of people who lost their doctors, some of whom died. So it's a dangerous thing when you try to get into too much government management of people's individual health choices.
Eric, in a previous life, you worked for Governor Richard Lamb, so you know intimately what goes into a State of the State address. When you're doing the very first one like this, what's some of the behind-the-scenes things? And I really like Governor Richard Lamb and Governor Jared Polis, two very different people, but what's some of the things that go into drafting a speech like that and what they're hoping to get out of it?
Well, once you're a mature governor, once you've been in office for some period of time, you get input from so many people, all your cabinet members, your senior staff. There's a jockeying for, which issue is going to get mentioned and what order they're going to get mentioned in. I think for an initial speech, such as what we saw this week, it's a little more. Polis clearly had a speechwriter or some help crafting it. And by the way, I thought it was a well-done speech. I thought he rose to the occasion. I thought he filled the podium. Some new governors can look small in the office at the very beginning. Jared Polis did not look small this week. I thought he rose to the moment. He filled the podium. I think it was probably more of a statement from him and a select few key writers and advisors as opposed to the hodgepodge, because quite frankly he's just been putting together his team, and even to the extent he has cabinet members, they've been on board for a week or 10 days or something like that, and some of those departments are still vacant. Having said, that I thought it was a good speech, a speech well done. I thought the inaugural came off well. If you were part, I noticed of all the prayers, of all the poetry or whatever, unless you were like a mainline Christian, there wasn't somebody necessarily there for you. There was somebody there for almost every other faith affiliation. But when I look at Jared Polis, at least at this point, I think time will change this. I still have 3 letters that come to my mind, which is ROI, for return on investment. And if you invest 23 or 25 or maybe $30 million in a project, we saw a return on investment this week when he put his hand in the air and took the oath of office. It boggles my mind to a certain extent how so many Democrats who get out of bed every morning railing against the influence of big money in our politics and are just fine, not just with Polis' gubernatorial candidacy, but with Jared's whole career. That said, it was a historic moment. He rose to the occasion, and I wish him well.
Natasha, at least on one of the key priorities, full-day kindergarten, while nothing was completely developed, it seemed that might be something where Governor Polis might actually have to press his fellow Democrats and lawmakers because that a path to that wasn't clearly built already from lawmakers. Do you think there was anything in the speeches we heard this week where he's going to have to take a leadership role and drive a group of lawmakers that may or may not want to fully actually execute an agenda like that?
Oh, absolutely. I think, personally for me, I'm notorious for making overly ambitious to-do lists. I now know there's somebody in the state who does it more than I do. However, there's every reason for him to be overly ambitious with the control that they have at the state legislature. He has a lot of people behind him, but as you point out, that doesn't mean that they're all exactly on board with the same plan that he has. What I think is interesting is as he was putting out that list, and none of it was big surprises. This is what he was campaigning on. But as he was putting out that list, I didn't get the sense that he hadn't been thinking about it, that it's just a dream, in the way that we've seen some more national campaign promises sort of come about. These are things that he and his team have been working on. I think we're going to see policy starting to roll out very quickly. I think we're seeing coalition building between his team and the rest of the legislature to make this happen. And of course, the big question will be, how do you fund it all, which will be what dominates his term as governor.